The panel today is going to tell you how AI does this, why it's important, and how they're doing it. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Rick Champagne, Sepi Motamedi, and Louis, I can't pronounce your last name. Take it away.
Wow, what an introduction. A world where Motamedi was pronounced but not Smithingham is excellent. Well, thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. Lots of great energy. Thank you for having us and joining us in this session. We are going to talk about personalization. We're going to talk about it as an effective tool for viewer engagement. We're going to highlight why it's a necessity in today's media landscape, and it really is, as the industry itself continues to evolve. And we're going to outline some strategies and technologies that are going to allow media companies to deliver tailored viewing experiences to their audiences. We've got so much to talk about. I'm so excited you're both here joining me. Let's just dive right in. From each of your separate perspectives, from a creative perspective, from a technology perspective, why don't you let me know what you believe is driving some of the trends that we're seeing in personalization? And Louis, let's kick it off with you.
Absolutely. And it's funny, with the panel is about Bespoke, but I would say that this is everything we're talking about is exactly the opposite of Bespoke, in the sense that to get to the scale we're about to talk about, it can't be Bespoke, but it's Bespoke in the sense that it is personalized, pun intended, obviously, within that context. But I think what we're looking at with this is an overall trend in the change of viewership. If you look at what's going on in terms of the media we engage with, pretty much all other media we engage with is hyper personalized. So our company, S4 Capital, Media.Monks, does a lot of advertising work. We do a lot of work with what's called DCO. So in the advertising world, that's dynamic creative optimization. Massively optimized systems that take in up to 3,500 data points on any individual, and then another 30,000 data points on econometric factors, down to the fact that, when I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and in March there's really bad pollen, and so I get more ads, and I have allergies. I get more ads for allergy medication when there's a higher pollen count. The broadcast industry, meanwhile, is over here broadcasting things in the same exact way it was broadcast 56 years ago. And when you start thinking about the way the rest of the other media that we engage with, and particularly with younger audiences, so when I grew up in San Diego, California, I'll be seeing 10,000 images a day, maybe. Didn't have a digital phone, didn't have any of that stuff. We did have a computer by the time I was 4. My parents grew up in Manchester, England, in the 50s. They probably saw 1,000 images a day. If you're a kid growing up in Vegas today, how many images are you seeing a day? Millions of images. And so the way they perceive the world is shorter, it's quicker. They're understanding unique images faster. And so there's a lot of great studies from Deloitte, from PwC, really interesting studies about how younger audiences, frankly, want shorter clips. And they expect a level of personalization to themselves. And I want to distinctly, and I'll pass to Rick, differentiate between personalization and targeting, because that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about targeting in the way an advertiser might. We're talking about creating stuff in the same way. When I open Spotify, I'm not listening to stuff I don't like, because I've been using Spotify for however many years now. As long as Spotify's been around, it knows what I'm interested in, and it surfaces stuff that I'm interested in because I have this rich profile of data. And when you engage with a lot of the media we create right now, it doesn't have any of that. And that's a real interesting opportunity for us to scale into our newer audiences.
Yeah, Rick, from a industry perspective and a technology perspective, what are some of the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're living in an era where there's bidirectional communication between viewers and the people serving the content, the people creating the content. And so that's something new, but also bringing online the entire ecosystem of technology that's now available. And, we're here with AWS. And so what's possible via the cloud now is absolutely unbelievable. Anybody has access to an AI supercomputer from their web browser. And so, it's just stunning what's happening. And so there are a number of things that have come together now. So all of that data that's coming in, all of the technology with AI, generative AI, so large language models, the ability to generate visual content, so images, being able to generate video, 3D, anything like that. And then you have recommender systems, and then you have speech and vision, and all of these things come together, and now you're able to create these unique experiences like Lewis is talking about, that was never possible before. So you could really get targeted, really get focused, but yeah, beyond targeting, it's about creating something unique for an individual.
And bluntly, a lot of it is about monetizing your content. We start looking at the way rights renewals are functioning right now. 29 of the world's largest sports leagues are all renewing their rights in the next 18 months. I think it's actually 27 now after some of them have gone. And they're signing up for longer form deals. Big numbers are being spent. And they're shifting over to digital platforms where advertising isn't necessarily native. And they have to look at how to monetize those systems, whether it's through microtransactions, whether it's through personalization, whether through it's selling individual packages. It's a study that came out, I believe this is Gartner, that indicated that younger audiences are willing to pay for a sports package. They're willing to pay upwards of $70 if it's in $3 increments per month. Whereas older generations 50 and above, are only willing to spend $35 once per month. And so there's an opportunity, if we start leaning into these systems using AI, to really scale.
And so, like, talking about opportunities, what kind of opportunities are created for broadcasters and media companies, when you have this transition going on between how technology is being adopted by the end audiences, dependent on their age groups and demographics and the kind of content that they like to see? What are some of the opportunities that this creates?
Well, I mean, if you look at, so for example, if you look at the way any of these platforms work with an algorithm, the opportunity to start serving more content to specific people and looking at places for sponsorship, for branding, for microtransactions. I think one example, what we're working with a client right now on is looking at how they could deliver highlights. And instead of just delivering it based upon plays, and we all saw this happen at the Super Bowl this year. Super Bowl was, I think it was the most watched telecast since the moon landing or something. And it wasn't because the game was particularly good. It's because there was a woman in the stands who a lot of people who weren't traditionally into football were interested in. And so looking at how you can engage with these new audiences to bring in new subscribers, create that personalization without alienating your subscribers. So we're working with one league right now to deliver an average of, I think it's 16 highlights to 35 different subcultures of fans per game. So you're creating cut downs based upon, like, so for example, you might deliver to people who are into luxury fashion. People are into cars. People are into celebrities. People are into specific genres of music. You create those cut downs. You create intersectionality from those cut downs, and you start seeing the fact that Post Malone fans are more likely to watch League of Legends than they are to play Fortnite. And so you're engaging with those systems. Or, like, for me, example, I'm a huge sneakerhead. I don't necessarily like some sports, but I absolutely watch quite a few sports specifically for the shoes in the game. Now, the problem is, though, Sepi, is a lot of the infrastructure that we're working with here is not designed to deliver, if somebody in the audience has better math skills than me, 35 times 16 or 16 times 35 times 156 is how many highlights that league is requiring. The infrastructure is just not set up to do that. And
crazy
to scale
numbers.
Into that.
Yeah. Crazy numbers. And so what are some of the from the technology focus, what are some of the opportunities?
Yeah, well, I mean, Lewis has touched on some great examples there. So take that Super Bowl, and then if you've seen any of the games that were created recently with Nickelodeon or with Pixar, where the entire game was retargeted in real time to animated characters. So, that's an example of broadening the audience.
Yep.
To an entirely new demographic. So now you've got kids who are just watching the game because they're watching it on, Andy's floor in his bedroom. But now if you could take that a step further and then even personalize that, well, what if there's something that you see in that, hey, there's a Woody, cheering in the background. Hey, can I purchase that Woody? And then add it to your cart on your Amazon Alexa. Or what if, you can put the family on the sidelines and just say, hey, can you put us in front row seats? And then you can see your family, sitting in the game too. So with generative AI, you'll be able to do that kind of thing. Another example that I've used before is I go down to my basement to my gym. I've only got 20 minutes today. So I, say to my Alexa device, hey, I've only got 20 minutes today. Can you recommend a workout? And it'll tell me, well, you haven't done your calves in a while, because I haven't. And you haven't done your calves in a while, and maybe, with that, you might want to do some extra curls, and, but you really need an extra 10 minutes of cardio, today. And so, like, generate a video for you. And maybe I want my specific sports hero to be the person who's, and again, you have to have the rights, and, there's got to be provenance and all of that kind of stuff and licensing, but, generate a video that person is now giving you a workout tailored specifically for you. So that's pretty incredible. But then going back to data analytics, you're a streaming service, and, you're getting so much data that that if your viewers are watching less than 5 hours a month of your service, they're 95% likely of, ending that service. But you also know that if they watch more than 15 hours of that service per month, now they're 75% likely to keep the service. So that's quite a shift. So now you can really optimize your business for your viewers and deliver content, because you also know what kind of stuff that they've been watching. So now you can start making really good recommendations. And then you can also make business decisions. And those business decisions could be something like, well, am I going to buy those, 2 or 3 movies that are trending right now? Or am I going to buy a season of, a league? Or am I going to create a show that's also trending using similar actors to these trending movies? So you can really make some intelligent business decisions to, really for your viewers.
You mentioned there's a use case recently, NHL Greens, where they did an NHL game, and there's actually a game this weekend where they're replacing characters with, I think it's Marvel or DC characters this weekend, but in that case, it was with sort of cartoon characters, and they had different announcers, and they saw a 60% uptick in female viewership, younger female viewership from that game, and specific viewership group that was not normally watching that game. So there is really interesting traction there as well. But I think, I guess, getting back to part of this is where things get really interesting is the fact that broadcast is such a data-rich industry. We go to this show and we see all the different, like, there's probably 20 different sports analytic groups in this hall alone. You have EEG over there. There's so much different forms of data. Anything that goes on to a sports pitch, field, rink is tracked. And there's an opportunity to use things like RAG to really engage with scale and start to build much more personalized content, particularly when, to your point about viewership. So we build platforms for a lot of viewers and for a lot of these major digital platforms. And when you start to look at what streaming data and streamers have, they have data down to like household level. And that level of information, you can start to get really granular and really interesting. And I think using a tool like RAG would be a way that we could explore that even further.
Just to riff on that for a second, there's a demo over in the AWS booth here. You probably saw this character called Wormhole, and from Men in Black, correct? No?
No. So, crabs have evolved separately 5 different times. And so, there's creative convergence occurs sometimes.
Let's get back to the topic at hand.
Okay. Well, okay. So there's a demo over here. There's this really cool character, and it's connected to an external database, and you can put whatever you want in that database. Because, of course, you can't retrain your large language model every day. Because a game has been played and there's a transcript of that game. So you're not going to train your large language model every single day. And so you have what's called retrieval augmented generation, which is you're going into this database and pulling out the most recent information and augmenting your large language model. And in the case of this demo over here, what we did earlier was we fed it some information about a press release that we put out last week for Holoscan for Media, something that we announced for NAB. And now that character knows all about Holoscan for Media. You can go over there and ask them what it is. It's really cool.
It isn't up to date on the NHL playoffs, though. I did ask it that earlier and was upset that it was saying that they was looking for Detroit to win, which I was not stoked about.
It's progressing, though. It's progressing to the right answer.
I'm
sure. I want to touch on something you mentioned, which is granularity. Okay. And so how granular can someone get when delivering some of the use cases and personalized experiences you guys are talking about, pun intended?
Obviously, it depends upon the level of granularity the platform has. But if you start looking at, say, a sports league that has their own season ticket holder app, that is broadcast on a major network or a major streaming platform, and if that major streaming platform has a shopping cart functionality as well to sell other things, all of that data is connected, obviously anonymously and using things called clean rooms, which we actually maintain for clients. And the granularity can get pretty crazy. Now, human beings, like within 6,000 data points, you start to get pretty clear pictures and predictive pictures of what folks are going to do. It's like the thing when people think their phone is listening to them. It's not. It's just like your data trail is large enough that it's relatively simple to predict what a person is doing within reason. So you can get incredibly granular. We tend to think that an average sports team is going to have 35 different subcultures. Now they're going to be consuming on probably 4 to 5 different platforms. They're going to be looking at a variety of different things. And then those individual subcultures may have intersectional secondary subcultures that want to engage even further. And so we tend to look at a number around 35 as an average per property. But depending on how long a property has existed, it can be a lot more than that. And you can get hyper granular, particularly as you have more performance information. You start thinking about like, okay, the amount of data that a music platform might have on you and where you can lean into that granularity to deliver that content, which gets really exciting. We have started to see an uptick in broadcasts where we're getting asked an average of 35 customizations, or we do for another client who's a streamer, we do about 1.5, I think it's 1.3 million trailers per show, variated. So you start talking about different languages, different models, and you get to this very large exponential model. Now, where that gets really exciting is when you track it back to performance data. And so you start seeing, okay, what's the uplift from that individual piece of content? But part of it, which we haven't even like touched in on as well, is like how we, from a sheer production perspective, I'm talking in like millions of pieces of content there. And that gets really crazy when you're starting to produce that quantity of content, connecting with that large scale of data. And part of it, I said this at the beginning, but part of what we're doing is advertising companies and networks and systems use this data. It's very commonplace. It's very second nature for that. And so we need, as broadcasters and entertainment folks, to start bringing in some of that data, not to water down what we're doing, but to look at how we can actually create content that is more meaningful and drives more uplift for us.
Absolutely. And I imagine, the volume of content, the volume of data points, it's so large, and it must require a tremendous amount of processing in order to be useful on a day-to-day basis. Rick, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So in the past 2-3 years, AWS has put in about 2 million new GPUs into the cloud, which is absolutely stunning.
Wow.
But they were also the first to announce support for NVIDIA's GH200 platform, so Grace Hopper, CPU, GPU combination. And, you can with our NVLink switch, but also with AWS Nitro, you can combine 32 GPUs into one giant GPU instance. The amount of compute power on that is absolutely unbelievable. You don't want your kids to use it for gaming. Let's just say that. But then also, scaling out, Amazon, AWS also announced the G6 instances that have the L4 GPUs. The L4 GPUs are for video AI. There's also L40 GPUs that are for graphics AI. And then the H100, H200s, for large language models, recommender systems, and the like. And then AWS also announced support last month at our annual conference for our Grace Blackwell platform. And so there are a lot of amazing innovations with that. And not to mention that, so data can be encrypted at rest, data can be encrypted crossing over wires. But with this new platform, data will be able to be encrypted during compute. Yep. For a first. So that's, for security conscious industries like financial services, healthcare, but also, the movie industry doesn't want to have any problems, and just being able to, do some processing on the cloud, you're getting this level of encryption and security that's never been possible before. So really looking forward to that as well.
But even beyond that, one thing that's funny, and I come from production. I was a union DIT at one point in time, started my career as a grip. And I think about, imagining, and my engineers are somewhere in here, Hey, what's up, Wes? I remember going to my engineers for the first time and being like, hey, so we've got to deliver 500,000 assets in 3 months. And on the live show we're doing right now, I need actually 16 different cut downs done. And the first time we did that, the chief engineer got on a call with I won't name the truck vendor, looking for 16 output possible trucks. And can you imagine the racks, the number of RUs for that? It was in the thousands. Like, are we going to haul a data center truck around? And like how does that work? And the problem that we realized really, really quickly is that the only way you're going to be able to deliver at scale to these sort of numbers is through software. Getting away from single-use appliances where you're plugging little copper cables, and yeah, it's kind of scary the first time you're using 2110 or, you can't crimp NDI, but the opportunity is once you're in these systems, you're not limited by rack space. You're not limited by all the different problems that you have with single-use appliances, and pretty quickly your costs plummet because you stop thinking about, okay, where am I? Literally, we had a job where it was like, yeah, you only have the client was trying to make it go away. So we were told you only had a 4 foot by 6 foot place, to park your truck. And it's a 4K show. So figure it out, buddy. And, you're not limited by that anymore. You deliver up to cloud. That show, we delivered a truck that was, I think, 3 foot by 2 foot by 1 foot. So the opportunity, truck in air quotes in that context, is to deliver at scale by getting away from these single-use appliance type workflows, and you start getting into these software-defined workflows where your opportunity for scale is just like button clicks, and your opportunity, to deliver to 16,000 different formats is a keystroke, right? And you're, being able to create instead of specking out, how are we going to ship 16,000 key pros? It's just not a viable way of thinking in this new landscape, particularly when we start delivering at the level of scale that we're delivering in. And that gets really exciting. It's something we're excited about within Holoscan, is looking at this opportunity to take it even a step further and start looking at containerization. Because in that case, you're not even worried about machines necessarily. You have this almost limitless opportunity to scale and to listen and deliver at all these different ways, much, much faster, much cheaper. And then as a byproduct, it's weird to say this is a byproduct. I believe deeply, and our company was one of the first signers of the AWS Climate Pledge. But we found out that these workflows are sustainable as well. We won an award last year for sustainability in broadcast for our NBA and VR workflow. And it's because, in fact, the truck I just mentioned takes about as much power as a microwave. And it's crazy when you start thinking that an entire month of broadcasting, your PCR produces, I think it was 0.7 metric tons of carbon, which is effectively a rounding error. For context, a flight one way between LA and New York is 16 times that. You start to get to a really interesting place.
Yeah, for sure. The impact of that is not insignificant. You mentioned Holoscan, and so that is NVIDIA Holoscan for Media. Rick, do you want to talk a little bit about what that platform is?
Well, I almost want to ask you as
You're my panelist.
Yes. Yeah, and I think Lewis did a great job covering a lot of Holoscan for Media there. But again, it's moving to software-defined infrastructure and software platform. And Holoscan for Media is really a platform to develop and deploy SMPTE 2110 applications. But also, Lewis talked about fixed function devices. So imagine, all of these racks of devices that do one thing, and they'll only ever do one thing. And so when formats change, when transcoding changes, and all of these things happen, those devices need to be replaced. Well, moving to software defined lets you operate those types of functions on the same hardware that you're doing everything else on. So it's commercial off-the-shelf hardware. And so imagine every one of those devices becoming a node in a node graph. So an AI upres is just a node. A compression de-artifacting is just a node. and you can build your AI pipelines with all of these different nodes, and you can do things like content restoration. So let's say you have some old content, you want to bring it online, and you can up-res, compression de-artifact, remove grain if it was shot on film. Exactly. You can colorize, do whatever and then create that pipeline to restore content in real time. So now you're not because there's a lot of content. Yeah, we're gonna pay to have it restored. You're gonna do every season of Star Trek, but you might not do the college game that was done 30 years ago. You might do some of the major games, right? But now you can have access to everything, and you also keep it in its original format. Yep. You don't have to keep creating a new version. You're doing all of this in real time at runtime. So, there are lots of opportunities, and there are a lot of partners that were announced as part of the HoloScan for Media press release that you did.
I think to your point about, and bringing it back to personalization as well. And again, I feel you on the single-use appliance stuff. I, at one point in time, invested very, very heavily in HDV format that maybe lasted 16 months. With that said, and I also probably own at least 26 different types of LTO. With that said, we talk a lot about exposing your media to AI, looking at how you create your own training models, and bluntly, that's not viable if you're not in a software-based space. If you're running over physical media, if you're running over literal copper, it's going to be a lot harder, and it's going to be a lot more expensive to get in that space, particularly if you're not looking at how you capture that space. Because we are working with a very, very famous university right now who has an archive for probably the most famous basketball player of all time. We said this at GTC, we announced it. So we're working with UNC around this and looking at the Jordan archive as an example of where running generative AI on that system is running and training models on that to pick up old, grainy, pretty crappy footage. No offense, UNC, but it's old footage when you didn't know this person was going to be a superstar. You have the opportunity to engage with that by running these systems, by engaging with software-defined spaces and looking at how you could personalize. Because then you start thinking about, okay, if we start our workflow, we track an athlete through their career. I think sports are becoming more, and you see F1 doing this, where there's so much story around the individual athletes right now, and the individual athletes are arguably media properties in and of themselves. And as that connects back into influencers, there's a very famously, I'm going to mispronounce this. Somebody Brazilian will correct me at this at some point. There's a famous influencer in Brazil, Casave, somebody else, it's something like that, who bought the digital rights to FIFA and has seen incredible growth on his channel because he's looking in that digital space and he's broadcasting to that audience.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for your insights, diving deep into hyper-personalization. I really appreciate it. This brings us to the end of our panel. I want to thank all of you for joining us as well, and enjoy the rest of NAB. Thank you so much.